From Hanselminutes.com, it's Hanselminutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 279, recorded live Thursday, August 11th, 2011. Support for Hanselminutes is provided by Telerik RAD Controls, the most comprehensive suite of components for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.telerik.com. In this episode, Scott talks with Rafael Rivera.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman, and this is another episode of Hanselminutes, and today I am talking to Rafael Rivera. How's it going, sir?
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. So your blog is withinwindows.com, and it's like an internals hacker, user. You're like a user, you're a developer. I mean, it's a delight. It's almost as if Chris Pirillo knew how to really program and debug stuff.
Yeah, it's a brain dump.
Well, but
basically.
it's a brain dump of really interesting things, and I think what's happening is you blog about the stuff that we all wish we had time to do. You know, like you have a post right here that's just like classic, what I would call classic within Windows, where an application didn't do what you wanted it to do. It didn't behave the way you expected it to behave. So you said, rather than complaining about it or going up on a forum and, just lighting into the developers, you fixed it. So what's the story with Splinter Cell and the Splinter Cell series and your obsession with it?
Right. So, long ago, Steam, that platform, that great digital delivery of games, they had a sale. I purchased the latest Splinter Cell Conviction, I believe it's called. And I'm like, wait, I can't play this. I need to go play all the older ones. They've released like 5 or 6 older games. And to catch up on the story, I decided, okay, let me start with, 1. So I played 1, 2. I mean, these are games that came out, 10 years ago?
Yeah, and they're classics. They're classics.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, so I loaded these up. First one went surprisingly well. It kind of hiccuped on the fact that I had a widescreen monitor. But it ran pretty well. 2, 3, I'm getting through these things over the weekend. And then this recent one, Splinter Cell Double Agent,
Mm-hmm.
I loaded up. It's clearly made by a different team of developers, so it's a completely different app, different app in this case. Fire it up. The screen starts spazzing out. I thought it was a widescreen issue, but then, like the post outlines, it goes much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
But the screen starts spazzing out. You start running into these games. You don't have shadows, which I think some of our Splinter Cell people out there will know that's crucial to playing Splinter Cell. You need to know if you're in a shadow or not, if someone can see you. It's a shadow-driven game.
Right. I mean, it's the whole point of the game is stealth, and you've got this really evocative split screen before and after where there's a guy walking on gray snow, and then when you turn the shadows and the lighting on, suddenly it's clear that he's out in the open with a light shining on him.
Yeah, exactly.
So somebody completely configured this wrong, but I don't understand how this is happening in 2010, 2011.
Yeah, so this was an Unreal-based game, and I did some searching on the internet to see if someone fixed this. I think that's where we all begin, right? We go to Google or go to Bing and run a search. Everyone's complaining about the same issue. They have these tweaks. They kind of work. They kind of don't. And I'm sitting here like, okay, I have this game. I've purchased it and I can't play it. And that's extremely frustrating. I could, I guess, fire up XP, put it on a laptop and play it there, but, no one wants to use XP anymore. So, I took it apart. I was like, okay, let me see what's going on here. I figured out the widescreen issues. That was pretty easy. I just replaced all their in-game videos with blank ones.
Well, this is interesting though, because one time I was talking to someone about some tech support issues that they had, and I kind of went off on a rant about how the computer is not a black box. And, we always have these jokes about how there's 2 kinds of people in computers, and you can just pick any 2 different kinds of people. But ultimately, there are the people who feel empowered by the existence of the computer, and there are those who feel oppressed by it. And what I like about you and your style is, here's a problem. Your solution is, let's crack this thing open. Like, there are so many people who won't even go into the Splinter Cell folder and open up the Splinter Cell .ini file and just start flipping bits around, right? What is it? What does this do? What does that do?
Yep.
They just give up and they complain. And the same thing is the case with programmers. I mean, .NET's not hiding anything from you. There's no directory on your machine that you can't see. So why do people feel like the computer is against them? In this instance, here's a game that didn't work. Now, I'm not making an excuse for the game not working. It sucks that it didn't work. But you just went in and started flipping bits around until you got the solution, which makes you wonder why they didn't ship it that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was doing some searching around, and it turns out this game was it was rushed out the door, and the graphics configuration subsystem in the game, basically you go to options, graphics, and you see a list of resolutions and a bunch of options. That menu doesn't really work, which is embarrassing, really. Even on the platform it was designed for, XP, these options didn't work. You'll see threads out there of people complaining anti-aliasing, for example, is broken, and it's funny because the file backing that interface is this INI you're talking about. It's just a plain text file. You go flip some bits and everything starts working.
And did you get it running basically what you expected? Did you feel by hacking this game together you got your money's worth then?
Finally, yeah. I'm still playing it now. This game, I must admit, is probably the worst in the series, but I'm still excited that I can actually play and enjoy the story.
So this is an easy example where, this is kind of an example, like I find myself doing this where I download an application and I run it and it says, oh, it's not 64-bit, so I have to right-click on it and say run in compatibility mode. Or maybe an advanced kind of Hanselman example would be I run coreflags.exe.
Yeah.
Right? Core flags is one of those things where if you know it exists, your head and tail's above 90% of the planet. So if you want to, listeners, if you want to impress friends and neighbors, learn how to use core flags to forcibly change the bitness on any CPU compiled .NET application and force it to run in x86 mode and then fix things left and right. And then also wonder why it wasn't shipped that way. That's definitely a trick that you can do. But you had a situation where someone gave you this Hello Kitty figurine. This is like a piece of hardware. And that's where my abilities end, right? I can twiddle bits and right-click and go to compatibility. But you had a piece of hardware that didn't do what you wanted it to do. What was the story there?
So before we get into that, I wanted to touch on the core flag stuff.
Oh, okay, please.
And, Scott's absolutely right here. If you learn core flags, you'll probably be able to fix like half the issues, application compatibility issues you have right off the bat. I think I have 2 or 3 issues on the blog if you do a search, where developers develop their application using the any flags dropdown in Visual Studio.
Any CPU saying that the application,
any CPUs,
right? They're saying the .NET application runs on x86 or x64.
Right, but then they tie into some native code that's x86 only.
Right.
So then when you run this on an x64 platform, it blows up. And you see this across the board too. It's from little developers all the way up to Yahoo and ATI. I mean, Yahoo Messenger came out one day and I had to fix that using that simple tweak. So yeah, I definitely wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's two ways to remember. One, always test on x64. But even better, from my perspective, and this might be a little bit out there, but I think if you're not going to use all that memory space, then just compile your stuff x86. There's just no reason to. Not to.
And I think even Microsoft admitted this with the whole Office 2010 discussion back then.
Yeah.
They said, look, if you're not going to be using Excel with billions of records or pages,
right,
you don't really need Office 64-bit. And
exactly. So, Hello Kitty.
So yeah, Hello Kitty. So Jenny, my girlfriend, her sister had purchased this toy from like a yard sale, or she picked it up somewhere third hand, and it's the classic case of you plug in a device into your PC and either you don't have drivers for it or the drivers that are out there do not work on the platform you're on. This is a very angering scenario, and most times you can't fix it because the drivers are low level enough to, you just can't hack it. Like a 32-bit kernel driver can't be hacked to work on x64. There's just nothing you can do there. But in this case, I was taking it apart, and this is all outlined on the blog post for listeners. But I was taking it apart, and I realized, wow, there are no real drivers here. It's just user mode software. But once I take apart something and realize it's all on the user side, it's exciting because it's like, oh, okay, this can actually be fixed. This is not a.
Well, let's pause for a second, because I think that and I've actually teased you about this in person, that I think you forget that not everyone is smart as you are. So let's back up for a second and make sure the listeners are following. If I get a Hello Kitty device, it would make sense that I would assume there's a device driver involved somewhere, and I might plug it in and I might say, oh, this is too old. This came out before Windows 7. It'll never work. Now, you just said that when I discover it runs in user mode, that's a wonderful thing and a time to rejoice. What does that really mean? What does it mean that this is just a user mode piece of software that runs the Hello Kitty figure?
Right. So, I misspoke there a little bit. This device, when you plug it into the PC, Windows has a set of basic drivers for pretty much every device out there.
Right.
So, for example, you plug in a printer, it will at minimum install a basic printer driver. If same thing with keyboards, mice, monitors, etc. This is why back then you plug in a monitor and it switches to VGA mode and awful graphics. But hey, it worked at least. In this case, the Hello Kitty toy was masquerading as a human interface device, just a generic HID device,
like a keyboard or a mouse.
Yep. So you plugged it in. It says, "Hey, Windows has found a user, a human interactive device, and installing the basic drivers for it." And then, poof, the pop-up goes away and nothing happens. It's just installed. So in this case, the software bundle that it came with was simply a piece of client software that communicated with the bare bones Windows driver.
Right. That's what you mean by user mode, in the sense that it didn't come with a piece of software that loaded itself into kernel space.
Yep.
It's just an app like any other app, and it's calling into user 32, doing its thing.
Yep. It's calling into the human interface device API that's well documented on MSDN, and does its little thing there.
Well, I can open up an INI file and I can make Splinter Cell work, and I can right click on something, but what do you do when you get down into, well, there's a DLL? How do I even know what the DLL is doing? How do I look at the functions it's going to call?
Oh, see, that's the fun part. So in these scenarios, first you'd want to see this thing in action, right? There's no sense in trying to disassemble something if A, you don't know it works, and B, you don't know how it works. So I took this thing and put it in a virtual machine with Windows XP. And if you read the little README it came with, it was actually targeted for Windows 95 and up, which is scary.
Which is awesome.
But so I said, okay, let me start with XP and maybe I'll work my way backwards. Hope to God I don't have to go any further.
Okay.
I fired up XP, plugged it in, and it worked. It spun around, made noise, it trapped all my keys. By trapped keys, I mean you push keys on the keyboard and it actually lights up, kind of like a keylogger without the malicious intent. And so it worked. So I was like, okay, so this thing definitely does work, and it works on XP. So now I can focus on what changed between Windows XP and Windows 7, or even Windows Vista as a stepping stone. So this is where we get a little more complex. I take the various components and just throw them into what's called a disassembler, and that basically takes the machine language, or the bytes in the file, and converts them into a more readable assembly language. And, the tools that you use out there, the one I use in particular is called IDA Pro, which is an expensive item.
Really? It's not something you can get a community-free version of?
No, they do have a freeware version that disassembles x86 only binaries, and it's really, really, really bare bones. But if you wanted to get your feet wet, definitely get the IDA Pro freeware version.
But wouldn't you say that this is where the managed business developer, the grid dragging, tree dragging, developer who's doing text boxes over data, where that person basically parts ways with the unmanaged code developer? Like you said, I threw it into a disassembler, right?
Yeah.
Right. And of course, immediately my brain exploded and began to leak out of my ears while you were just like, I just threw it my favorite disassembler, one of many disassemblers I have in my arsenal. Where does how does a managed developer start even thinking about that? I mean, I think most managed developers get as far as, calling into exported DLL functions, maybe using pinvoke, and that's about as far as it goes. Maybe we've all forgotten our assembly language from college. It sounds like you have not.
Yeah, so as the developers started to evolve, or not developers, the languages started to evolve. I've actually been working my way backwards. C# came out. I kind of learned that, and then I started learning C++, C, assembly, and but I think a good way to look at this is that in managed code, you would normally fire up reflector. Right? You take your binary, throw it in Reflector, and it converts it into readable source code that you can almost kind of compile. It's the same thing here. IDA Pro has come so far that it will produce almost compilable C++ code.
Get out.
Yeah. So, of course, it's not a cheap product, but it produces something that's completely readable, and you don't really have to know assembly language at that point.
Hi, this is Scott, coming to you from another place and time. Are you using agile practices to manage your software development? There's lots of tools in the market that manage the steps of a project, but most of them focus on individual roles. Get ready for a solution that caters for the success of the whole team. The guys at Telerik introduced Team Pulse. It's an agile project management tool that'll help you gather ideas, estimate, plan, track progress in a common workspace. Finally, companies, regardless of their size, can use a lightweight and convenient tool that makes all the stakeholders work as a united team, even if they're in different countries. By combining intuitive user interface and the power of Silverlight, Team Pulse removes the roadblocks that you typically face in applying Agile in an effective manner. No more lost data, no disparate systems, no lack of critical analytics regarding the health and velocity of your project. See for yourself. Get a free copy for 5 users and 1 project at Telerik.com/Team Pulse. And please do thank Telerik for supporting Hanselminutes on their Facebook fan page, facebook.com/TELERIK. Telerik. We do appreciate it. There wouldn't be a Hanselminutes if there wasn't Telerik helping us. So when you poke around in this Hello Kitty application, you have the exe, and then you start figuring out, well, it looks like there's actually this exe, and then there's this DLL. You take a look at the DLL, and you find out that it has what's called exported functions. Mm-hmm. You find out that it's presenting functions out to the world, and then you poke around inside that and figure out what those functions use. So it's basically like layers. You're looking at the call stack. The executable calls this DLL, like read buffer and write buffer, and then that read buffer, for example, then goes off and starts poking around in what you had mentioned before, the human interface device, well-documented stuff. Are you saying that IDA Pro shows you that, it's calling the foo function? I know about that function on Windows.
Yeah, absolutely. So you point IDA to the DLL. You go ahead and just simply double-click the exported function, in this case, device INI, which stands for device initialization. You just double-click that, and it will show you an assembly listing, but, intermingled with that disassembly are actual human-readable comments that say, hey, this is a call to Windows function A, Windows function B. Here are the parameters.
And are those written by real developers, or is this generated by the disassembler?
This is completely generated.
Wow.
It's really smart stuff. So it kind of makes the reverse engineering process a lot easier.
Sounds like a very mature product. I mean, like back in the day, we didn't have any of these things. Back
in the day, you just run a disassembler and it spits out raw ASM and good luck.
Well, and honestly, looking at that raw ASM, I think that when you see that scene in The Matrix where they're looking at the Matrix code that's falling, and the guy's like, yeah, I've been looking at this so long, I just see blonde, brunette, redhead. That's literally what it feels like when you know your assembler. And, 20 years ago, I was that guy. I have since overwritten all of those bytes with, Microsoft Light Switch or different things like that. Okay, so this thing goes and calls create file. So you trace it all the way down to something obvious, a nice basic API call like create file. Mm-hmm. That's then failing.
Yep. So basically, the device was opening up a communication channel with the device to kind of tell it, hey, look, light up and spin, please. Mm-hmm. And using a debugger, I set a breakpoint on that. So I can run through the execution and it would stop there. And I can see exactly what parameters it's calling with. Mm-hmm. I can jot them down on my piece of paper. And I stepped over it and it's like, hey, access denied. It's like, well, wait a minute. What? So if you can repeat this process in the production environment, the Windows XP VM I talked about, mm-hmm. and see it succeed. So that's our first error that we need to figure out, and you kind of repeat this process until the thing works.
And you seem to specialize on this stuff where, in my experience, kind of reading your blog over the last year or so, you seem to specialize in the something has changed. Like someone, like if I may be so bold, like when you don't like something, it's because someone moved your cheese.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You really don't like that. And this is like an example where a DLL function that worked 2 versions ago doesn't anymore. I have no insight into the change, but I can demonstrably show this is not working like it used to.
Right. And to highlight, actually, I just forgot what you said earlier, but, I was going to highlight a particular phrase you said and I forgot it already, but
that's okay.
The part that bugs me the most though is that it's hard to find.
Oh, moving your cheese?
No. Well, that's annoying too, but, finding documentation on what changed mm-hmm. is impossible. In this case, I could not find any documentation that showed, hey, breaking changes from XP to 7 or Vista, mm-hmm. Create file on HID devices may fail, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
There's nowhere you'll find that. Probably internally in Microsoft, you have some cool change log that says that, but that's not available to us.
You really don't like that. I mean, I think another thing that people will learn by reading your blog is that you really don't like secrets.
Right.
At all.
Yeah, and another thing that annoys me is arbitrary limitations.
Yeah.
And Microsoft's really good at implementing arbitrary limitations. Mm-hmm. Now, I say that, but then when you actually dig deeper, it's usually because of some legal reason or support reason, and there are reasons behind it. I'm not saying Microsoft is trying to be malicious, mm-hmm. but I still hate the notion of having an arbitrary limitation. For example, you run an app and it says, hey, I don't work on XP. Mm-hmm. Get Windows Server. And I think that's how Mark Russinovich started down his little hacking route with his registry changed.
Yeah.
He made that little bit flip and turned NT workstation to server. Same thing.
He basically started by saying, this black box should not be black. It should be transparent. So it's not, and therefore I am going to blow the doors off of this box. But you do that not only in software, but you do that with drivers, you do that with websites. You'll hack cookies to see things. Like anytime that there's a preview or a beta or a gate in your way, you will find a way. But what's nice is that you not only bust open the gate for yourself, but also for other people. Have you ever gotten in trouble or really upset someone at Microsoft for opening something that shouldn't have been opened?
Yeah, several times. Mainly because I did it in a public manner, and then I didn't really sit down and analyze the impact of it. One of the most recent items was this Bing thing. Bing rolled out a preview to various people. I don't know the exact scope of that. However, I shared one of these cookies. I'm like, hey, look, if you share this cookie with everybody, you get the new homepage. Everyone loved it.
Mm-hmm.
But then we found out later on that everyone that used the cookie is also sharing their search history. This huge privacy issue. So then I started seeing searches for various adult topics in my browser. Phone numbers, emails. You'd be amazed at what people type into their search engine.
Well, even things about yourself and what fans they were of you.
Yeah, absolutely. It started getting really personal. I was like, oh, God.
People were searching for you.
Yeah. So
this was basically you enabled hijacking of a session by virtue of the fact that you gave away what was effectively a session key.
Right. It was exactly a session key. So I emailed the Bing team immediately. Look, guys, I screwed up here. I shared this key. Can you somehow block this on your end so this doesn't spin out of control? And they're like, oh, God, what did you do? But
do they know you? I mean, is this like a thing? Like, I mean, if you show up and you're like, good news and bad news. The good news is, there's no good news, just bad news. They like, oh, Rafael, what have you done again? I mean, you're building a relationship with people. Do you feel that you're building, like, are they really mad when this happens, or are they like, thanks for caring about the product? Like, one perspective would be, he cares, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right? And another one would be like, man, what's your deal? Stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, usually the first several emails or phone calls sound somewhat negative. But then when you actually, dig deeper and talk to these guys and maybe some other folks on the team, they're like, look, guys, I'm a big fan. I love when you hack this stuff. It's really creative. So it's like, okay, I feel a little better there.
Yeah.
But that's what happened with the Windows Phone stuff, for example.
What happened with that? What's the story there?
So with the we opened up like 3 topics here and we haven't finished.
That's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. We got 10 minutes.
So I'm a part of what's called the Chevron WP7 group, a group of Long Zhang, Chris Walsh, and myself. Mm-hmm. And we basically opened up the phone to homebrew development, which is basically, you write your own code and you deploy it to the phone. It doesn't go through the marketplace or its approval process. In the process of doing that, we worked around the developer unlock requirement. Basically, Microsoft has imposed a $99 fee on unlocking your phone for development purposes. Now, of course, that fee covers other things like deploying applications via the marketplace and support and some other stuff. But we worked around that requirement and let people deploy code on the phone.
Okay.
And
so you basically enabled homebrew, as they say.
Yep. Homebrew, custom, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to say the word jailbreak because we didn't gain additional privileges. We simply averted the $99 requirement. I mean, Microsoft puts out a tool that does this very thing if you pay $99. We just did it for free.
I see.
So it's not a jailbreak in the traditional sense. So we got around that, and Brandon Watson messaged us and called us, and that started a whole relationship with the Windows Phone guys that we're still working on today.
And do you guys see eye to eye, or is this an issue where you're always going to be poking the edges of what they think is okay, and like, is it a love-hate relationship?
It was initially, but they've come around and they see the value in homebrew development to the point where they're now letting us deploy an official unlocking solution in the next month or so. Now, it won't be free, but it'll be much cheaper than $99.
Really?
Yep. It'll be, I think, about $9. You'll be able to plug in your phone, unlock it, write whatever code you want, and test it out. And then at some point, if you want to deploy that application on the marketplace, at that time you can purchase a real account and deploy it that way.
Well, that's interesting. Do you think that are you forcing them to do stuff like that and go outside the The comfort zone, like
Microsoft?
yeah. I mean, like, is this a good thing? Are you doing everyone a service because you are getting people to, you're pushing the envelope and then forcing Microsoft to accept that the envelope has now been reset?
Yeah, I would definitely think so. Yeah.
Are you doing, why Microsoft? Why not Apple or Google or Facebook? Is this just a thing where you're a fan? So as a fan, this is how you show your love? I mean,
yeah, I've been using, Windows since it first started, right? I mean, my birthday shares, I share a birthday with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Windows. So, yeah, I've just been using Windows forever. I know it in and out and kind of what I stick to.
And how long have you been doing this? Like I say, you are a low level guy. Have you always been low level?
Yeah, well, I've always been working backwards. Everyone's moving to HTML5, C#, Link. What's
next? How much lower can you get?
Yeah, I really want to learn electronics and hardware. That's been it's very hard. I know people out there that, for example, the iPhone hacker guy, I forget his name, which is embarrassing, but they plug these USB things in there and they start finding all these USB exploits, and it's like, wow, I wish I could know all that, but
yeah,
that might be too low. I'm not sure.
What's next? What's the next big hack for you that will be on your blog?
I got to finish the Hello Kitty stuff because, believe it or not, I didn't finish that.
People are watching.
I got it to spin up and make, or the lights came on.
Yeah.
When I push keys on my keyboard, nothing happens. And it turns out it's a very, very complicated issue with our favorite technologies, UAC and the lesser known UIPI, which is a user interface privilege isolation. I probably screwed that all up, but
okay, some other security thing.
Yeah, user interface privilege isolation. So basically, it prevents lower privileged apps from communicating with higher privileged apps on your desktop. This is the reason why you can't cut and paste between an admin elevated process and a normal one.
Yeah.
So yeah, the introduction of all those technologies really screwed up the way this Hello Kitty app was capturing keystrokes, probably for good. But
it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do?
So there was actually a supported way of getting that all working.
Yeah.
Which would be really interesting. I got to finish up that blog post. Let's see what else. We're still cranking on the Chevron WP7 official unlock solution. I'm trying to finish this remote effects stuff. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, real briefly. We've running out of time.
Okay, so remote effects is that set of technologies that kind of sits on top of RDP that lets you do really cool things server side. For example, play DirectX accelerated games or use the applications, Silverlight and Flash, full motion video, USB devices, et cetera, et cetera. This was demoed at a partner conference, I think last year or maybe a while ago, where HP was on a thin client, bare bones hardware, playing Crysis over RDP. Now, some of the folks out there that have used RDP and have accidentally stumbled on a Flash page know how slow RDP can be.
Yeah, it's awful.
And to see someone playing Crysis over it at a fully playable speed is amazing.
Wow. And you're working on this, or you're just working to explore the area?
So it's primarily a server technology, but I've been trying to bring it into the consumer space because I find it interesting that you can buy a heavy-duty server, stick it in your closet, and have all these thin clients at home and never have to keep upgrading all these machines.
Nice.
You can just upgrade the server every now and then and delegate all that to that box. So I've been running a series on that. It's a little delayed right now because I'm trying to hack around some limitations. But
cool. Yeah. So people can check out your blog at withinwindows.com.
Yep. Or if they want to follow me on Twitter and hear all my complaints, it's within Rafael.
All right. Very cool. We'll put all of that information in the show notes.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, Scott.
This has been another episode of Hanselminutes. We'll see you again next week.